I'll kick things off. Let me pull up my little notes here. Perfect. Well, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Patrick Mercer, Assistant Vice President, Wellness Director at Frost Insurance. Basically, that just means I work the insurance division that is owned by Frost Bank, and I get to work with employers to create engaging and healthier workplaces, which is actually how I got connected with Kate, who's our speaker today, but I will introduce her in a minute. I want to thank Jeremiah and Texas Mutual for being the presenting sponsor for emerging leaders and these ongoing sessions that we have. It's been a great community. I'm super thankful to be a part of that. For those of you who are new to United Way or emerging leaders, United Way's mission is to bring people, ideas, and resources together to fight poverty in our community. And emerging leaders is a group of current/future leaders that support United Way through philanthropy, advocacy, and volunteerism. United Way, we talked about, brings people and ideas together, and emerging leaders is just a great group of people who are passionate about the same things United Way is passionate about. It's been a blessing to be an emerging leader and on the executive committee. And so for those of you who maybe don't work for United Way, if you're a prospective member, if you give $84 a month to support those causes that United Way is super passionate about and everybody on this meeting is passionate about, then you can be an emerging leader as well and benefit from all of the things and the content and the resources and events that we get to put on virtually right now, unfortunately, but we're doing what we can. So if you're interested in learning more about emerging leaders, please connect with Jennifer. And if you don't have her contact information, we can get that to you. As far as the mission of United Way, I think we can all agree that, investing in the Austin community is more important than ever. And for a lot of people who are really passionate about pouring into the things that United Way is passionate about, one of the struggles that I've had, I'll just be, transparent and open. Certain organizations and causes that I've been super passionate about, sometimes I think it's hard to not want to just jump all in whenever you get involved. And sometimes you can start to experience a little bit of burnout, and you begin to not even look forward to some of the meetings or Zoom calls or volunteering or whatever it is in that organization. And so fortunately, unfortunately, it's something a lot of us deal with, whether it's work, personal life, or even those things that we are passionate about volunteering with, is we reach a point where we're just burned out and we don't look forward to pursuing whatever that passion was for us. The fire's gone, our cup is overflowed, right? And so trying to keep that balance. And so I'm super excited to just introduce you guys to Kate Ross. I don't think I've ever actually told her this, but she's actually one of my favorite people on the planet. She's one of those people that when you meet, instantly you kind of want to be friends with her, and she's got some great content, and she just leaves you feeling happier and also kind of inspires you to want to do more. And so she's a friend. She's the founder of Modern Health Pros, has a really cool story about burnout that I'm sure she'll probably dive into. But she's a consultant, a keynote speaker, just a thought leader kind of in the workplace wellness space. And her mission is to elevate the health of humanity through science of behavior change and the art of personal story and human connection. So I think we're going to get a lot of story and connection from Kate today. And so I'm really looking forward to that. I hope you guys are as well. And she is going to lead us through a few things that are going to kind of help us if you are struggling, some things to look forward to. Just ways to be a better all-around human, which I know we all kind of want. So I will step to the side and I will let Kate drive the rest of what we've got on tap today.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. I'm so grateful for you and our friendship and to know you and to be now connected. Patrick mentioned we'll be talking all about stress and burnout today, but really what I hope you get out of today is it's going to be very different than the normal narrative that you hear around stress. And so my mission today is to offer a new and fresh perspective on how you think about stress and how it shows up in your life, and really put you back in the driver's seat of how you can control your relationship to stress. So with that being said, let me share my screen with you. So my goal for today is to keep this really interactive. And so I have a couple of really fun exercises for us to do together. Let me get my screen going. Okay, perfect. Can everyone give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen okay? Okay, awesome. I like to keep this really interactive. And so if you can just use the chat feature when I cue you, if you have questions, there'll be time for Q&A at the end, but feel free to put the question in the chat box and I'll make sure I get to it at the end. And so with that, let's get started. So I know we did an initial poll. I would love for you to chat into the chat feature, rate your current stress level today, or over the last 30 days. 1 being barely stressed, 10 being the most stressed ever. Let's see what we have. We have 8, we have a 10, we had a 2.5. Wow, I'm really impressed. Patrick said 3, 7. Okay, so we're across the board a bit. I'm really a lot of 8s, some 9s, and even a 10. So it sounds like in general, on average, we're feeling pretty stressed. So I'm curious, let's talk a little bit more about that. So when you think about that 8 or that 7 or that 3, what is the root of that, right? So like, what are some of the main sources of stress in your life right now? And feel free to be vulnerable and share what you feel comfortable sharing. Would love to hear from you. What are some of the things that are really causing those feelings of stress for you? I know for me, it's really just juggling all of the professional things I have on my plate with my business, while also, working from home alongside my partner and trying to coexist in one office space. That can be quite stressful. Someone said living at work, uncertainty, lack of motivation for self-care, full-time work while being a full-time mom to a 6-month-old, absolutely. COVID, canceling social outlets, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I think we can all agree that ultimately we use this one word, right? This one tiny 6-letter word to describe so much of how we experience life, right? So we have these larger life events that can often be traumatic, right? Like a global pandemic, like heartbreak, like a health crisis or losing a loved one. These things are, like I said, oftentimes very traumatic and can, with it come a lot of anxiety and intense emotions. But we also use stress to define these micro moments of life, right? These small daily hassles, right? So, things like a growing email inbox, which I'm sure we can all relate to, a growing to-do list, social media and news, which are bombarding us almost 24/7. And so there's a lot of noise, right, in our environment. So again, we can agree that stress really defines so much of how we experience life. So I'm curious, I want to do another quick poll and just chat into the chat feature your answer. Do you believe that stress in general is harmful to your health and well-being? When you think about stress, do you think it plays a negative role in your overall well-being? A lot of people said yes. Someone said it can be. Okay. And you're absolutely right? There's certain types of stress and how we relate to stress that absolutely can be harmful. But what I want to leave you with today is a new, fresh perspective. So rather than sit up here and preach about how bad stress is and how it's the leading cause of illness and disease and all the things, right? All the things you hear from the media and health practitioners, I want to give you a different perspective, right? I want to empower you to think about how stress can play a different type of role in your life. And so before we dive in deeper, we need to define stress, right? Now we have these ideas in terms of what's causing it for you personally and for this group specifically. But let's actually define it. Like, how do we define stress? So trusty Google, I'm sure if you're like me, you use Google for quite a bit. Google defines stress as a pressure or tension, a state of strain resulting from adversity or very demanding circumstances. So I'm curious, when I shared this definition, like, what are some images and thoughts and feelings or sensations in your body that come to mind when you hear this definition? Go ahead and just chat it into the chat feature. Headache, racing pulse, spiked heart rate, tight chest. So I'm getting a lot of the physical sensations. So I want to share with you something that came up for me earlier this year, and it's kind of stuck with me a bit. When I first read this definition, when I was prepping for a talk I was giving, I just saw this image of this really big boulder sitting on a mountain. And it just started kind of slowly tumbling down the mountain, and it was gaining size and speed as it was going down the mountain. And I was like at the bottom of the mountain trying to run/fight off this like boulder that was tumbling towards me. And so tunnel vision, someone said, spiraling thoughts, these are all absolutely true in terms of how we experience stress, not just mentally, but in our physical body, which is actually one of the most important pieces. So this is where we start to flip this definition on its back. And I want to get your thoughts and feelings on how this next definition makes you feel compared to this definition. So this is my favorite definition. So instead of a pressure or tension, what if it's just a physical, mental, or emotional response that occurs when something you care about is at stake? When something you care about is on the line, your body has a physical, mental, or emotional response. I don't know about you, but I just feel a lot lighter when I read that. I feel like my shoulders feel less tense. I feel like I can breathe a little bit deeper. I feel like I'm in more control and I feel more empowered. I'm curious, how does this definition make you feel? Any thoughts? Maybe you're neutral on it. Maybe you're like, okay, well, I just heard that other definition, so I'm still a little bit kind of wrapped up into that. Any thoughts? Someone said, I wonder if the at stake is real or perceived. Great perspective. Someone said, I think about all the things I don't care about that still cause stress. Relief. Stress can be a motivation. Someone said, I think at stake can be intimidating. Yeah, these are all super, super insightful feedback on this, right? Changing the narrative. Someone said it's difficult to take on stress for things that aren't really your responsibility. We're going to talk a lot about boundaries, so we're going to do an exercise on that specifically. So I think the whole goal here is, right, like, find a definition for stress that makes you feel really empowered. It could be this one, it could be a completely different one, but I would love to challenge you to take away this action item of redefining stress for yourself. I actually read something online a couple weeks ago that said, instead of using the word stress, say that I'm under divine pressure because I'm birthing something great. Right? This divine pressure, even just putting the word divine in front of pressure makes it feel, at least for me, a little bit more empowering. So again, find a definition that really suits you and is going to make you feel really empowered at how you perceive stress. So what's really important to note when we think about redefining stress, for people that report high amounts of stress in their life, so the people that reported the 8s and the 9s and the 10, studies have proven time and time again that for people that report high amounts of stress, also report high amounts of purpose and meaning. So who here, in the chat feature, who here wants to live a meaningful and purpose-driven life? I know you all are part of the United Way for really good reasons, and you're so compassionate. And so I'm sure it's, 1,000% across the board, you want to live a meaningful life. And so just know that in order to experience high levels of meaning and purpose, we are going to experience higher amounts of stress. And that's okay. And we'll talk about how we can actually, again, stay empowered in that to give stress meaning and purpose, and then also tactically give you some tangible tools that you can use when you're feeling a little bit stressed or overwhelmed. And so it leads me to part of my journey. When I was back in my previous career, I was in the financial services sector. I worked in that industry in banking for about 8 years. And I was your typical high achiever go-getter, right? I wanted to do all the things. I wanted all the opportunities in front of me. I was constantly on volunteer committees. I was also part of the United Way back in Pittsburgh and Chicago, where I had a lot of my banking career. And ultimately, I had this limiting belief, right, where I thought productivity was really defining my self-worth. So I thought the busier I am and the more I have on my schedule and my calendar, the more filled up it is, the more productive I'm going to be, and the closer I'm going to be to getting towards the goals and desires that I had at that time. And so it was August of 2016, and my days were my normal day was getting up, going to a breakfast event, going to client meeting after client meeting. I was in this client-facing role. And so I'm curious for any of you that are in, these client-facing roles, just it can be exhausting, right? Like, we're on calls, we're trying to show up and do everything we can for our clients, or even our team, people that we work with and our partners. And it can get exhausting. And so I was on that hamster wheel of feeling like I needed to be everywhere to everyone at any given time. And so my boundary level was 0, right? I said yes to mostly everything. And it was really hard and challenging for me to say no, which I know Patrick has mentioned earlier on when he kicked us off. It can be really challenging, especially when we're highly empathetic and compassionate and purpose-driven people. And so I was at a work event after hours one day. It was networking, and I just started to feel really lightheaded, and I was like, I need a break. And so I went to go walk the mile or so home to my apartment, and I almost passed out. I completely, my eyesight went black. I felt like I was going to pass out. I couldn't breathe. And so I hopped into a cab and had the cab driver drop me off at Northwestern hospital at their emergency room. And I thought for sure something was happening in that moment. And after getting tests back from the doctor, they said, Kate, you're the picture perfect of health, like nothing to see here, and set me on my way. And so as I was in the cab ride on the way home, I just knew like something had shifted in me. I knew that this was the end of this hustle era and something had to change. And so ultimately I learned that I had developed this chronic autoimmune condition that was really the manifestation of years and years of living in this headspace and this heart space of feeling like I needed to hustle for everything. But ultimately it was the most challenging time in my life, and also the most meaningful, right? Because while it was the most stressful, it also led me to leave that world that no longer served me, that was no longer aligned with my purpose and definition of meaning, and really gave me the courage to step out onto my own and launch Modern Health Bros and have this business now getting to impact so many lives. And so ultimately, I learned a lot firsthand, and my mission now is, again, to avoid people like yourself having to go through something, this drastic. One reflection I had, and this is going to kind of segue into our first exercise together. One reflection I had when I was thinking about, like, what were the root causes? How did I get here, right? Like, because I'm all about, we create our own reality. We're in the driver's seat. There was something or many things I was doing that led me to this place. And so I started to recall these moments where it would be like late afternoon or early evening, and I was just getting home, or I was taking a quick break before an evening event, And I realized how chronically I had stopped breathing. You know, I lost access to that part of my body and my nervous system that's so important, that when we're giving and giving and giving all of our energy, if we're not filling ourselves back up, we can't continue to give. And one of the best ways to give, and what I've learned, is really turning on that light switch between our sympathetic nervous system, which is that fight or flight nervous system. And our breath is the quickest and easiest way to do that. It takes just a matter of 30 seconds to a minute to actually activate that response. And so what I want to do with you together today is teach you a quick breathing exercise that you can use throughout your day, before meals, anytime you feel like you really need to get grounded, focused, and really switch off that stress response. So I will invite you to sit up straight in your chair or wherever you're sitting, and put both feet flat on the ground beneath you. Shoulders back, shoulders down, chin up, just feeling really comfortable in your space. And then just close your eyes if it feels comfortable to do so. And just start to bring awareness to your physical body. You know, we talked about all those physical sensations that you feel when you think about stress, and how that can get stuck in our physical body. And so this is a great way to release that tension. Just start to breathe really intentionally through your nose, and then exhale out of your mouth. And then I want you to bring your right hand to your low belly and your left hand to your chest, right over your heart space. And on your next inhale, I want you to feel your belly rising and pressing against your right hand, filling all the way up, all the oxygen flowing into your bloodstream. And then on the exhale, feel your chest and your belly drop, exhaling your lungs out completely all the way through your mouth like you're blowing out of a straw. And then just continue to breathe really deep into those hands. Matching the cadence on the inhale with the cadence on the exhale. So if you breathe in through a count of 4, then you breathe out through a count of 4. And as you do that, bring awareness to your face and any tension you're holding on to. So it might be between your eyebrows, it might be in your jaw, in your upper neck, and just see if you can continue to breathe, but breathe into those areas where you feel the most tension. Maybe you get a little audible on the exhale and sigh out loud. And then on the next exhale, just try fluttering your lips. So I call this the horse flutter, and it sounds like this. So for the person that said they have the 6-month-old, and for anyone that has babies or young children, you probably make this sound when you're playing with your children, but it's actually a really great way to release tension in the face. And so for those of you that maybe grind your teeth at night, or just find that you get a lot of headaches, it can be tough to let go of that tension. But the horse flutters, if we do the flutter, it's actually virtually impossible to hold on to any tension at the same time that we're fluttering our lips. So I like to do like a good minute or 2 of that. Just inhaling through the nose as normal, and then fluttering your lips on the exhale. Sometimes it exhibits some laughter too, which feels good because we get that oxytocin flowing through our blood. And then just take one more round of inhales and exhales on your own. And when you're ready, you can flutter your eyes open and just notice any shifts, right? Notice if your heart rate has slowed a bit. Notice if any tension has dissolved. You might feel a little bit lightheaded, which is totally normal, especially if you're not used to doing deep breathing. So let's keep moving. We have a couple more exercises. So before we dive into our next exercise, I wanted to share another story that my own story reminds me of. And so the folks at UBS, for those of you who are not familiar, this is a financial services organization. And so this organization is about almost 70,000 employees large now. But back in 2008, they had about 60,000 employees. And so think about where you were during 2008. If you recall, that was the financial collapse and crisis. I'm curious, just chat into the chat feature. Where were you during that time? What was going on in your world? Were you affected by the financial crisis? Were you in a good place? Were you in college? I have a lot of college folks. So the folks at UBS, they were in the heart of it, right? Because the financial collapse was completely happened as a result of activities that were happening in the financial sector, and these folks were in the heart of it. So this organization, they decided to do a study around stress specifically. And so this is fascinating. They split the organization into 3 groups. The first group received the traditional stress management training. Who here received stress management training from your employer? I know I did in the past, and it was very negative, right? Stress is going to kill you. It's so bad for you. All the things we tend to hear about how terrible stress is for us. The second group, this was the mindset intervention. They received a more positive view on stress and the purpose that stress has. The third group received no training at all. So what were the results? So I'll tell you, across the board, the second group, the mindset intervention that received a more positive perspective, they reported lower levels of anxiety and depression, less back pain, less headaches, less insomnia, and they reported greater levels of focus, engagement, productivity, and collaboration. So what the study continues to prove is that even just a brief mindset intervention can really shift not only how we perceive stress, but the biological reality that occurs in our body in terms of the signs and symptoms that stress typically exudes. So with that leads me to ask you, is stress really the problem that we need to be solving? What if the problem isn't stress inherently? What if it's just how we perceive stress and the meaning we give stress? And so if we choose to ask that question instead, the answer becomes pretty simple. It's let's get better at stress. And so resilience is this innate human capability that every single one of you has innately as a human being. We all have different levels of it, and at different levels at different periods of time in our life, but it is something that we can always work at and get better at. It is not this static skill set where you're born with a specific level of resilience and that's it. You can always get better and practice and take action to build this important skill set. And I know we're talking really on a personalized level around the importance of resilience, but I want to challenge you to think about how does this show up for you and your teams and your organization in the workplace. So resilience essentially is the ability for us to adapt faster, to be more agile, to be more productive, and to meet business challenges face on in a more dynamic way. So this isn't just about personal resilience, but this is how do I go back to my team, whether I manage people or not, and help people to build this important skill set so that we can continue to thrive, not just as individuals, but also as organizations. So with that, I want to use the rest of our time today to really get tactical. So this is where I want you leaving with a lot of different tools on, okay, now that I know that my focus should really be on building resilience and getting better at stress, how do I bring resilience to life, right? Like, I know that word can sometimes feel a little bit intangible and hard to wrap our arms around. Like, how do we actually get better at this? And so I'm going to walk you through the 4 steps that are, you know, kind of like the simplest to implement. I work when I work with organizations, and we go through an entire framework that's a lot longer term, and there's more steps involved, but we only have so much time today. So I'm just going to hit on the really important ones. And so the first one is that the most resilient people acknowledge their stress. They acknowledge that something is uncomfortable. They acknowledge their feelings, and they acknowledge it in their physical body, right? Like, where do I feel that sensation? And so something that's really important to note here is that, right, feelings are just information. And so when we feel something, whether it's an emotion or a physical symptom and sensation in our body, it's just information, right? It's just our body giving us a guideline into what we need to do more or less of. And so pretending that everything is great and just, you know, having this false sense of positivity is equally as damaging and toxic as negativity can be. So we really want to strive for this sense of realistic optimism, right? Where we're staying really in control of our current situation. And so, like me, when I shared a little bit about my story and what the root causes of my burnout were, it was really this inability to set appropriate boundaries. And I know, as givers, as empathetic people that are really compassionate about the work you do and giving back, it can be this can be more challenging for us more than other people, right? Because we inherently are wired to give and give and give. And so Brene Brown, she's like one of my boundary setting heroes. She's an expert on this. So this is a quote from her: "Compassionate people ask for what they need. They say no when they need to, and they say yes when they mean it. They're compassionate because of their boundaries that keep them out of resentment." So easier said than done, right? These are words on a screen, which, you know, can be more challenging to actually implement in real life. But what I want to do is just walk through a quick visualization exercise and getting you to think about boundaries and how and where maybe you need to set some of your own boundaries in your own life. So I'll invite you to close your eyes. You can also feel free to pen and paper, take some notes as things are kind of coming up for you. But I want you to think back over the last 30 days, over the last month, and think back to a situation, it can be big or small, where you felt like you said yes when you really meant no. And now I recognize that as professionals, as parents, as spouses, as partners, sometimes we have to do some things that we don't really want to do. And that's a part of being human. But I would bet that there are far more things that you can actually say no to than you think. And so think about this specific moment in time, pull up the people and the place and the imagery that was involved. Where were you? What were you feeling at the time? And how did that situation evolve? What did you commit to, or what did you say yes to? Or more importantly, what didn't you say no to because you felt like you had to do it? You felt like you were just obligated, and you felt guilty if you didn't say yes. And I want you to send that version of yourself, that past version of you, just extra love and compassion. Because if it wasn't for that version of you, you wouldn't be able to learn the lessons to evolve and show up differently the next time around. So there's no judgment here, only acceptance. And now I want you to start to shift your thinking and just see and imagine how you would like that situation to play out in the future. How can you set a boundary? What can you say? And more importantly, how can you say it in a way that honors what you really need? Recognizing that this boundary is a means and a path to fill your cup up so that you can prioritize yourself and your self-care so that you can give back. Does that show up at work? Does it show up in your personal life? What are some themes and patterns that you see? And I would just encourage you to continue to think about this, even in just small micro ways, right? We have to start out small when we're implementing boundaries until we can get more and more comfortable with setting them. And so this doesn't stop right in a conversation today. It really starts today, and it continues as you continue to step into action. Okay, so let's dive into number 2 on the tactical items. 2 is purpose and meaning, right? So I know we've talked a lot about purpose and meaning. You might be thinking, what does that actually mean, Kate? Like, how do I step into purpose and meaning more so that I can build my resilience, so that I can get better at stress and show up better for myself and for the people around me? So I'm sure many of you have heard of core values, right? A lot of organizations have core values. Some of them do a great job of embodying them and others not so much. And as people, we're no different, right? And so you might have a really good hold on what your core values are. We certainly don't have time to dive deep into a core values exercise, but I would encourage you, if you're not quite sure, to really do some work on that. Because ultimately what we found is that people that are linked to their core values see greater levels of meaning in their stress. Meaning when they go into an experience, if their core values are nowhere to be found, they know that is an experience they probably shouldn't be in the first place, and probably a result of them failing to set a boundary, right? So these two go hand in hand with the boundary setting. Something really interesting too and cool is that people that are linked to their values, their core values, on an ongoing basis report increased pain tolerance, physical pain tolerance. They can endure more pain. They have greater levels of clarity and confidence, and that unhealthy rumination after a stressful event. How many of you can relate, right? A stressful event occurs and you're thinking, oh, I should have said this to them, or I should have done this. That unhealthy rumination decreases when we are linked to our core values. People that are really linked to their values also see stress as just this temporary, inevitable part of life versus something that's really defining something that's messed up in their life, right? They just view it as, I'm a human and this is inevitable. Number 3, shift your mindset, right? So the core message from today is shifting our perspective on how we look at stress, which can be easier said than done. So I want to give you some tactical items around this mindset shift that will help you actually do that. So the first is acknowledge your strengths. When we focus on what we're good at and we focus on what's positive, we have a greater internal sense of control, right? We feel more in control of our personal circumstances. Ask yourself and journal on it. Write it out. How have I prepared for this? Reflect on when you've overcome similar challenges or challenges that have exhibited similar emotions. So, right, like we're sitting in the middle of this global pandemic that none of us have been through in our lifetime. So you might be thinking, Kate, this is not like a challenge that I have nothing to compare this to in my lifetime. I'm sure, though, that a lot of the feelings you're feeling, you've felt before in other circumstances. So think about and reflect on when you felt similar emotions and how you overcame them. And then my favorite is reframe the situation. So reframe how you think about the situation, the thoughts and feelings you're having. So we're going to do a quick exercise on this. But before we do, I want to bring Albert Einstein and Fred Simpson into this really quick. So there's 2 main stress hormones that I want to talk about really quickly. So cortisol, how many of you have heard of cortisol? Just raise your hand or do a head nod, right? Cortisol gets this bad rap, right? It's this demonized stress hormone. And it can if it's chronic, right? But cortisol serves a purpose. It converts sugar into fat into energy. So we really need it at the end of the day. Then we have DHEA. And DHEA allows our brain to grow stronger from stressful events. It allows us to learn quicker from stress. And so it also enhances our immune function. So who here during a global pandemic doesn't want to have a stronger immune system? I know I do, right? And so there's something called the growth index that we all have. The growth index essentially is the ratio between DHEA and cortisol. And so the higher the DHEA to cortisol ratio is higher in people that view stress to be helpful. Meaning when you view stress to be helpful and meaningful, your body releases greater amounts of DHEA in relationship to cortisol, allowing you to learn and grow faster from that stressful experience that you just had, and allows you to be healthier because your immune system is increased and working more properly. So this isn't just something that's just occurring in our minds, it's actually occurring in our physical body and how it shows up. So with that, I want to do a quick automatic thought and reframe exercise to actually get you to see what it feels like to reframe a situation. So I want you to think about a situation within the last week that made you feel stressed, anxious, or upset. It could be that same situation from the boundary setting, visualization. It could be different. I would encourage you to pick something that doesn't feel like it would trigger you immensely with a lot of intense emotions to think about it again. But just pick something, and whatever comes to mind first is your intuition and your subconscious mind's way of telling you what needs to be focused on. So just trust that. And then pen to paper, I want you to make a list of all the automatic thoughts that you had around this chosen situation. So on the left side, just everything that happened immediately when the situation unfolded. What were you thinking? What was going on? What were you feeling? And then next to that, on the right side, I want you to write down a different interpretation of that event, of that situation, and those thoughts and feelings. And perhaps even a positive lesson that you learned coming out of it. And then lastly, just reflect, now that you've gone through steps 1 through 3, how are you feeling now emotionally and energetically about that situation? So I'll give you 3 or 4 minutes to do that. And then I will ask for a brave volunteer to share his or her experience. And we will wrap up. We'll take about 2 more minutes to wrap up. Take another minute or so just to wrap up. Okay, let's wrap it up. Is there anyone that wants to share their reflections and kind of walk us through this exercise in terms of what came up for them? Any brave souls? You can also feel free to chat into the chat feature if you don't want to come off of mute and share verbally.
I'll volunteer.
Awesome. Thanks, Haley.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had this stressful meeting with opposing counsel this week, and it was like giving me a lot of anxiety. So my automatic thoughts, did you just want me to share my automatic thoughts first and then the reframe, or do like?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so I was like, I'm gonna mess this up. I'm gonna say the wrong thing. I'm gonna sound dumb. I'm gonna cost my client money, and I'm gonna commit myself to something I can't deliver. So that's automatic thoughts. But now, reframe in hindsight. I'm going to learn how to handle this type of situation better. I'm going to trust my training and my brain. I'm going to be myself. I'm going to work efficiently and thoroughly, and I will communicate boundaries.
Oh, that's amazing. And how are you feeling just overall now after the reframe?
Like a lot better, actually. I think sometimes like you can get, I can get in my head about like a situation, and I completely think about all the worst case scenarios, and those rarely happen. So I spend a lot of like time and energy like planning for worst case scenarios when I could spend more time and energy like focusing on better outcomes.
Yeah. And it's, that's human, right? I think a lot of us can relate to the worst case scenario, and we don't have a ton of time to dive into the science behind this, but just know that we are wired to think negatively, at least initially, because of our ancestors. And there was a time, for us humans where we had to think the worst was at stake because we were at risk being chased by a lion and eaten for dinner. And, we have that same wiring in our brains, even in modern day, when we're not really at risk of life or death situations. And so that still shows up in the workplace. And so it's really just good to be aware of, this isn't me, this is just my brain's wiring, default wiring, and I am in power to overcome how I interpret that. So thank you, Haley, for sharing. That was an amazing example.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anyone else that wants to share? Going once, going twice. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you again, Haley. So we'll move on to the last one, and then I'll open it up for some Q&A. The last tactical piece is connection. So just staying connected. And I know that in 2020, it's more challenging to stay connected for obvious reasons. And we have to get much more creative with how we go about maintaining connection with people that we care about in our lives. But ultimately, we talked about DHEA and cortisol as these stress hormones. What a lot of people don't realize, though, is another stress hormone is oxytocin. And who here has heard of oxytocin? And so, sounds like a lot of people. So oxytocin is commonly referred to as the love hormone or the bonding hormone, right? It's released during intimacy and during childbirth. So we don't often think of it as a stress hormone. But the reality is when we stay connected, when we feel connected to others during stressful experiences, our stress response includes oxytocin, and oxytocin combats the negative effects of stress. And so our heart has special oxytocin receptors on it. And so when our stress response includes oxytocin, it binds to these receptors, which repairs our heart cells and any micro damage that's done during stressful events. So it literally strengthens our cardiovascular health when we stay connected to others. And so that is the end of the presentation today. Just a quick reminder of the 4 steps. So it's acknowledge our stress, how are we feeling, stay empowered, connect back to purpose and meaning through our core values, and always checking in to make sure that the stress that we're experiencing is linked back to our values in some way. Shift your mindset through these techniques, and find creative ways to stay connected. I'll make sure that you all have a copy of this so that you can reflect back on it. But it was so lovely connecting with all of you. Again, I work with organizations and teams within organizations that are going through a lot of change to come in and do longer transformational training and coaching on resilience in the workplace. So if you have questions either personally or organizationally and want to chat more about how I can help support your team, feel free to reach out to my email there. And with that, I would love to open it up to any Q&A. We have about 3 or 4 minutes left. So any questions or just thoughts, feedback, anything that really resonated, would love to hear your feedback from today's conversation.
Hey, Kate, I've got a quick question. Are there any resources or tools or apps that you personally use just to kind of help identify different stress levels, or providing tips to kind of help you get through stressful situations? Like, what do you personally do outside of, you know, breathing techniques and things that we've kind of practiced today?
Yeah, that's a great question, Patrick. So I have a pretty extensive morning routine myself, which is where I really get grounded, and I do something similar in the evening. And that typically involves some combination of physical movement, which lately has obviously been a little bit more challenging because I've been doing some stuff from home, but usually it's stretching, just getting like things moving in my physical body, I find really affects my ability to be better at stress mentally and emotionally. I usually meditate anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. I actually have, and I can include it when the slide deck gets sent out, but I use this this headset called the Brain Tap, which is linked to a meditation app itself. And it essentially has light and sound technology that helps to balance the parts of your nervous system that are responsible for that stress response. So that's like one of my things I've invested in that I feel like really moves the needle for me. A lot of times it's just slowing down too, right? Like, I think we're oftentimes wired into this consumerism self-care where we think we have to buy and purchase things in order to be healthy and well, but oftentimes, I find that the biggest needle movers for me are like the simple things, like slowing down, making sure I'm getting enough sleep. Like, since the pandemic, I've been probably getting... Oh, was there a question? Okay, I think someone just came off of mute. I was gonna say, I've been getting like 10 hours on average of sleep a night and loving it. And I know that maybe not everyone can do that given their personal circumstances, but that for me has been a huge game changer for me. Like, my blood sugar goes crazy when I'm not getting enough sleep. And that can be a big stress trigger. Eating really well and just nourishing myself, trying not to skip meals even when I have like back-to-back Zoom calls all day. So if I know I'm going to have back-to-back Zoom calls, just doing some extra meal prep, or outsourcing and just getting some meals either delivered or doing like a big grocery store run a couple days before. So just that kind of stuff really combined with one another really makes all the difference for me. Let's see, I think there were some chats. What sleep, someone said. Someone said it's so nice to set aside time to reflect, especially in the COVID era. Absolutely, you are not alone. We are all going through this together and have, of course, different experiences. And I think just talking about it, I would encourage you to talk about it in your workplace too, if you're not already. I think just normalizing vulnerability and normalizing the emotions around what everyone's going through is really a great first step. Any other questions? I'm curious, is this the first major session that you've done around stress and burnout since COVID, or your organizations that you work for prioritizing having those conversations? What does that look like for you all? Anyone want to share or type into the chat? Someone said we talk about it a lot at work. This is our first session. Someone said a lot of first times. Talk about a lot at work. We had a meditation. One company had a meditation. That's awesome. Well, good. Well, again, I'm a resource. So if you have questions now or in the future, feel free just to send me an email. If your company has questions and you want to get more of this and dive deeper, this is, this isn't something we do once and we're like, oh, we're good to go, right? This is an ongoing thing that we always need to prioritize and practice. So I would just encourage you to think of it not as this destination that we'll ever arrive at. It's just this ever evolving process that we have to work through throughout our life. Well, sounds great. It doesn't look like there's any other questions. I will turn it back over to Patrick and potentially Jennifer to wrap it up. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Kate. I feel more relaxed already. So unfortunately, I can't take the nap that now I feel like I probably need from feeling more resilient and just calm and reflecting on the things that trigger my stressors. So hope everybody enjoyed this as much as I did. And I know I look forward to one thing Kate didn't say, but yeah, she puts out great content on social media too. So if any of what you heard today resonated, I would advise you connect with her and reach out to her and just follow her channels that way. Some great content there. But I'll tee it over to Jennifer if she has any closing thoughts.
Thank you, Patrick. We were going to have Ariel close us out, but I think we are experiencing a little bit of trouble with her microphone. So I am just going to...
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah. You're great.
Okay. All right. I pressed the right button. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your time with us today. And Kate, wow, just thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience. My name is Ariel Sadler, and I am a technical writer and trainer at Texas Mutual Insurance, and I am also an Emerging Leaders Executive Committee member. I am a new mom who just went back to work and is in the middle of a move, if you can see all those boxes behind me. So I really needed this session today, and I took so much from your presentation, Kate, but as someone who struggles personally with setting and maintaining boundaries, I appreciated the tools that you provided to combat that. I definitely needed it. I hope you all, like me, feel refreshed and ready to put some things into practice to bring your best selves to not only your personal and professional lives, but any volunteer work that you do. As Patrick mentioned at the top of the presentation, now more than ever, it's important to invest in United Way's work. United Way has been fighting the inequities that COVID-19 has exposed in a bigger way for decades. And instead of striving to get back to normal, let's reimagine what those systems could look like. Let's create better systems and systems that work for everyone. Election day is approaching, and it's important to exercise your right to vote. And here are some reminders. Last day to register is October 5th. Election day is November 3rd. Early voting is October 13th through the 30th. And to check your registration status, visit votetexas.gov. Thank you to those attendees who are already Emerging Leaders members. Your investment allows us to continue this crucial work. And if you are not yet a member of Emerging Leaders, please visit our website. The link is in the chat to learn more and donate today. Emerging Leaders give $1,000 or more annually, or $84 a month. Or you can participate in our Emerging Leaders Step Up program and start by giving just $500 annually, or $42 a month. So for information about joining Emerging Leaders in the Step Up program, please reach out to Jennifer Woods at jennifer.woods@uwatx.org. We would all love to see you at our next event. We're hosting a game night on Thursday, October 22nd. We're thinking it might be Halloween themed, so maybe an opportunity to wear costumes since Halloween's been kind of canceled this year. But we'll send out the registration link in the follow-up email. Again, thank you all for joining us today, and let's go put into practice all of these wonderful things that we've learned. Bye, everyone.